All right. Welcome, everybody. Laura Frankie from the Housing Development Consortium of Seattle, King County. We're doing one of our Learn at Lunches, and we're really excited today to have the folks from Salmon-Safe and their colleagues that are helping them out in different ways to support the program to talk to us about some great work that they've done and share a number of different projects. So I'm going to turn it over to the team and let them take it from here. Ellen, will you please take it away?
Thanks, Laura. And just gratitude to everyone who's joining us today. Really appreciate you being here with us. I'm Ellen Southard with Site Story. We have worked with Salmon-Safe for 18 years, and I'm joined by my colleagues. First, want to acknowledge Anna Huttel, who is the certification manager for Salmon-Safe. She works across Puget Sound. And she's been with us for 12 years already. So welcome to Anna. Nate King, who's with Venture Construction, that played a pinnacle role in the work that we did at the Southard with Homestead Community Land Trust. And Nate's firm, Venture Construction, was also is led by one of our first Salmon-Safe partners in the construction industry. And they also build affordable housing. So they're a really great partner to have with us today. And then Maren Bjork, who is with Site Story, is a highly skilled landscape architect and does a lot of our outreach and engagement work. And so Maren was the project manager for the green stormwater infrastructure projects that we installed at the Southard, and we'll be sharing that as one of our case studies today. So again, thank you very much. This is an important time when it comes to affordable housing, important time for the environment, and a time where we're facing a lot of challenges. So today we hope to just build on the partnership approach, help solve some problems, and look to the future of Salmon-Safe's affordable housing initiative. Just really want to also share our gratitude with the Housing Development Consortium. They're a wonderful partner. This is our first year as members, but we are really glad to be part of this momentum of housing equity in Puget Sound. And then also want to acknowledge that we get to be here as because of King County and financial support from King County to Salmon-Safe, which is an environmental nonprofit. It's going to go over kind of the high level aspects of Salmon-Safe. But in the meantime, I'm going to start to share our PowerPoint and then share some big picture thoughts around the challenges that we have in Puget Sound and the needs that we have here. So let's see. I need to go to the very top. Okay, I'm giving it all away in fast motion here to get to the top screen. All right, healthier homes, greener futures. Some of you might recognize this illustration. That is the Southard in Tukwila, which is the first zero net energy and Salmon-Safe certified project in the country. Zero net energy, meaning that it's part of the Living Building Challenge umbrella and one of the most rigorous green building certifications you can achieve. So we know that HDC members are very mission driven, and the mission of your work aligns very closely with the mission of our work, starting with water quality and the economy. Of course, everyone deserves clean water. And we also recognize the interconnectedness between natural systems and the economy. Here in Washington State, commercial fishing provides 200,000 jobs and 14 billion in Washington State's economy. And many of our commercial fishing families live below 80% AMI, but are critical to our economy. And so just keeping in mind that there's lots of people out there that are looking for affordable housing and need housing that keep the engine running here in Washington State. We're also very dedicated to the cultural identity of the indigenous people of the Salish Sea. Most of us are in Duwamish territory today, and we want to acknowledge our partnerships with the Duwamish tribe and the importance that the Duwamish tribe plays in the history of our city and our region. And then also, really, again, thinking about human health as an integral part of the work that we do. Salmon are an indicator species, so if salmon can be maintained at a in healthy environments, so can all the other species, including humans. And then there's also the interconnectedness of species in general, not just the cultural identity of our tribes, but the food systems of our resident orcas and other marine habitat that depend and thrive on each other, and therefore the importance of clean water in our region. And then food systems. So clean water is integral to healthy food systems. And that is really the start that Salmon-Safe got. We started out working with farmers and then moved on to all kinds of other land uses. So we're really we're all about land and cohabitating with natural systems and all species thriving and surviving. So Puget Sound, second largest estuary in the US. It is a beautiful part of our country and oftentimes why people want to live here. Puget Sound is home to 200 species of fish, 100 species of seabirds, 26 mammals. Oops, sorry, I shouldn't have left including on there, but that includes some of the species that we're going to think about today: seals, orcas, sea lions, and other species that are important to the food chain. And then 3,000 invertebrate species, and many of those live in our shorelines, and those shorelines are where we receive a lot of that pollution. And then the invertebrate species also include things like oysters, which are also integral to our economy. And then for some of you who may or may not have been at the HDC Summit in January, we had a really compelling presentation by Eco Northwest. I think this slide, courtesy of them, really sums up where we're at. But being ranked number 6 for underproduction of housing is a pretty severe number when you think about the fact that there's 50 states. We're one of the wealthiest states in the country, yet we rank number 6 in terms of underproduced housing, and particularly housing in the affordable housing market and for low wealth families. So that's an important detail to keep in mind, thinking about where needs are concerned, but also thinking about with this exponential demand for housing comes exponential growth and stressors on the environment. So here in Puget Sound, the Puget Sound Regional Council projects that we need 800,000 new units of housing by 2050. Approximately 300,000 is for folks that live below the 80% of the AMI. Of course, the greatest need is for affordable housing for families that are living at 30% of the AMI. And on top of that discussion, Governor Ferguson in recent months called for 1 million units of affordable rental housing statewide. So that is a lot of pressure on our natural systems to cohabitate. And we know in the last 100 years, Puget Sound has lost over 40% of its habitat to development. So these pressures combined are reasons for all of us to partner together to keep Puget Sound a beautiful, clean place, clean water, clean air for our families, and also to create progress around healthy housing and greener futures for our communities. And so really what we're here to talk about today is how do we cohabitate? We've got families um, that depend on these ecosystems, not only for um, you know, economic welfare, but mental well-being, human health, having fun and recreation, and connecting our children to nature. And at the same time, we're sharing this space with other mammals like baby seals. So yes, it's a cheap trick. I'm using pictures of babies and baby seals to encourage you to think about how your projects can play a role in Puget Sound recovery. And we absolutely acknowledge, with all the experience that we have working with affordable housing providers, we want to acknowledge we know how difficult your financial decisions are, and oftentimes stormwater and different technologies for green stormwater infrastructure fall to the wayside just to get roofs over people's heads. And in all the cases of the projects we're going to share today of affordable housing, Salmon-Safe has taken the initiative to fund that work and those partnerships ourselves. None of our affordable housing providers have been required to pay certification fees. We have been really lucky in recent years to have support from generous donors like King County and other private foundations, the city of Portland, et cetera, that have helped us get to the standpoint where we can inform the development of healthy habitat and healthy homes for the affordable providers we work with. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Anna, and she's going to share a little bit of background about Salmon-Safe.
Thank you so much for setting the stage, Ellen, and also for getting us organized today. I don't know about everybody else, but I'm equally motivated by those sobering stats as I am by the cute critter photos. Um, so for those who Salmon-Safe may be new to, Salmon-Safe is different than most certification programs you may know about. We were founded by Pacific Rivers, which is a river and native fish protection organization, around the time of the Endangered Species Act listing of sockeye salmon, followed by Chinook and coho, with the goal of developing a market-based incentive that rewards landowners for protecting water quality and habitat. And we're now an independent Portland-based nonprofit working across Cascadia. Our mission is to transform land management practices so that Pacific salmon can thrive in West Coast watersheds. And we do that work through a network of place-based partners that include other certification organizations as well as environmental nonprofits. And the Salmon Nation range has informed our Pacific Northwest focus to date, ranging from the Fraser Basin of British Columbia down through into Northern California, which, believe it or not, salmonids do range to. Salmon-Safe offers certification across a range of land types and management activities, including urban development, which is the focus of our conversation today. And in all of these site typologies, we're looking at exterior impacts of a site on its watershed, and our standards are based on the biological needs of Pacific salmon. We recognize that every site is unique, and therefore our requirements are not prescriptive. They're based on the opportunities and challenges presented by each individual site and its characteristics. In the couple of decades that we've been doing this work, we've seen huge strides forward in green building and sustainable agriculture, though not so much in ecological function, climate resiliency, and water quality protection. And that's where Salmon-Safe's primary focus is, whether we're talking about an international airport or a biodynamic vineyard. And it also makes Salmon-Safe, rather than a competitor to programs like LEED or the Living Building Challenge, quite complementary and makes projects eligible for innovation points. In Salmon-Safe's urban work, stormwater management tends to be the biggest area of focus. We look for projects to manage both water quality and quantity on site to the greatest extent feasible through green stormwater infrastructure, or GSI, as well as rainwater harvesting. And then to move down in our hierarchy, which is much more detailed in our standards than this graphic here, but moving down to more what we would call gray, usually unvegetated and underground systems as a last resort. And as you'll hear about later from Nate, we're interested in these principles not only in site design and the long-term operations of a project, but during construction as well. So with that background in mind, I wanted to share a few examples of salmon-safe affordable housing projects to show that these ideas, when they're embedded from the beginning of the design process, don't need to be more expensive than conventional, maybe code minimum alternatives, and can even provide cost savings on the maintenance side once a project is constructed. So to start with, this is Mariposa Village, a roughly 7-acre development that sits a short distance uphill from the Columbia River in Hood River, Oregon. This project will provide 130 units of affordable intergenerational housing. And the site, although you can't quite tell from this particular rendering, features 2 wetlands, which have been embraced as a central piece of the site's design and given a generous buffer from walking trails and structures, and really placed as a central design element. Bioretention facilities will provide treatment for all on-site runoff from the project's hardscaped areas. And then new vegetation that's planted will be based on a planting palette that's entirely native and adapted, improving ecological function while also minimizing the need for water for irrigation long-term. Then next we have St. Francis Park Apartments, which has been operational for a number of years now. And it features some of these same characteristics as Mariposa Village, but in a much denser urban environment in inner Southeast Portland. St. Francis Park was a private urban park that was owned and managed by the neighboring St. Francis of Assisi Catholic Parish. And then after careful review of resources, the parish concluded that the park had been underutilized and would better serve the community by providing affordable rental housing. So Catholic Charities partnered with Home Forward and purchased the site in 2014 and created the design for what you see here, which is St. Francis Park Apartments. So the prior park became a developed site that's 62% impervious, but nearly every drop of runoff goes either to flow through stormwater planters, permeable pavers, or landscaped areas in this central courtyard area that act like vegetated filter strips. The project also created green street planter swales at each corner of the site, even though code didn't require their installation. And that was to make up for the small percentage of stormwater that they couldn't treat through those other measures that I mentioned. And this really exemplifies Salmon-Safe's philosophy of utilizing low impact practices that go beyond code minimums and environmental regulations. And then last, but absolutely not least, I wanted to share one of our more recent projects, the Spirit Journey Healing Village in the Skyway neighborhood of Seattle. The mission of this project is to provide culturally informed healing services, safe transitional housing, and comprehensive support to overcome the impacts of generational trauma, domestic violence, and/or sexual assault and substance abuse for Native American women. And it is sadly the only project of its kind in the United States, but hopefully one of many to come. The development brings together 4 residential parcels that will total 1 acre. There's currently just a single residence on the site that will remain as the project is developed in phases. And rather than having structured planters or bioretention like those other examples I just shared, this design aims to treat stormwater largely through sheet flow to vegetated areas, vegetated low-lying areas at the southern end of the property. So although calculations from the civil engineer are still critical and required, this is a really excellent example of how, if you have the space, a site doesn't need to have a highly engineered design to treat stormwater in a way that's protective of downstream water quality and also providing that water quantity control to limit high flows during an extreme storm event. Temporary irrigation will be provided for new landscaping, and once plants are established, irrigation will then be suspended or the system may be removed entirely. And the landscaping will be biased, like those other projects, towards native and drought-tolerant plants, including plant species of tribal significance. I think really beautifully displaying how design choices that are beneficial for pollinators and downstream aquatic life can also provide healing for the site's human occupants. And also just want to give another shout out to King County Waterworks for helping to provide funding to make some of these features of the project a reality. And with that, I will hand it over to the next presenter, Nate.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Anna. Hey guys, I am Nate. I'm with Venture General Contracting. And like it was mentioned, we have been a longtime partner with Salmon-Safe, and Jack, the owner of our company, was one of the first in the industry, I think, to partner with Salmon-Safe. So it's been a good mission and a pleasure for all of us. I'm going to talk a little bit about the what it means to be accredited as a general contractor, and then how our work contributes to the Salmon-Safe initiative. We undergo regular site visits and evaluations, and a lot of what Venture does isn't necessarily heavy on site or civil works, but also tenant improvement based. And so not on projects that have a higher, let's call it, environmental footprint. Even when we do projects such as a smaller commercial TI office space, right? If we do proper planning, prefabrication in order to reduce waste, reduce labor, trips to site, things like that, that overall reduces our carbon footprint and our impact on the environment. So that's something we strive to do as a company. One of the projects that I was able to be a part of, that was also a Salmon-Safe accredited project, was the Sounders new training facility in Renton, Washington. It is the former site of the Long Acres racetrack. This was accredited and inspected by the Salmon-Safe group. So before we got out there on site, established any site controls or earthworking, there was a site visit, making sure that our plan was put in place. Salmon-Safe reviews our stormwater pollution prevention plan, right? Make sure that all of the site controls we are going to put in place are adequate and not going to affect, as you guys can see, the local wetlands there that lead to rivers that lead ultimately into the sound. So whatever we do on site, making sure that that is contained throughout the course of construction. Couple of things about the site and that project. It was completed last year in January 2024. We had a total build of 8 months, so it was a pretty quick process. But there was several challenges along the way, one being a very large site. It was a 14-acre site, including 4.5 brand new fields. And I chose this photo because you can see all of the different ponds. There was 4 different ponds around the site that any of our construction activities could run off into those ponds, ultimately lead back to a river and the sound. So there was extensive maintenance and work in making sure that all of our site controls didn't lead to any pollution or stormwater runoff. This is also a good photo because it shows several elements of construction that are used in terms of helping the initiative in the environment. On the left side of the site, you can see a bioswale, which all of the stormwater runoff from the fields and the parking lot adjacent leads to those ponds. Prior to that, it goes into the bioswale where there's a filter media at the bottom, which filters out any pollutants from tires, pavement, and then anything from the fields as well before it goes into the wetlands. Couple of construction related design decisions were obviously the bioswale and the filter media. The cork was used as an infill product for the fields in lieu of your traditional black crumb rubber. One, it's better for the environment, and 2, it actually keeps all of the players' feet a lot cooler during the summertime. And then another great benefit is that, I don't know if you guys have been to a Sounders game and seen them hose off the fields during halftime, but part of that is for keeping the ball moving quickly, but another reason is to keep it cool. And so this way the cork keeps the fields cooler, meaning that you need less water to hose down the fields, also a benefit. Another very fun part about this project was the challenge of it being in the floodplain in downtown Renton where it was. So under each of the artificial turf fields, there are floodplain chambers, basically giant void spaces under each field. So when the water table rises, the water has a place to go. So instead of offsetting or adding additional footprint to the site, or maybe only being able to build 3.5 fields, all of that water, when the water table rises, can occupy spaces under the turf fields, meaning we just lessen our overall footprint, I think, which was a big one and a huge undertaking in design as well.
Hey, real quick, if there was an affordable housing project that said, say, had a playground and play fields for children, could some of these strategies be applied at a different scale?
Definitely, yes. And I was going to segue into that in my next project application, but yes, 100% for a playground or something like that. There's materials to be used for permeable walkway surfaces, and then obviously ways to treat the stormwater runoff before it goes into a local estuary. So this is a
Thanks.
project we have coming up, Seattle Housing Authority, Jackson Park Village. I am not okay, real quick in response to Matthew. The filter media is it's a very expensive product, but it's a very quality product, and then it's protected basically on all 4 sides with a filter fabric, a, a more expensive filter fabric, so that that filter cannot be contaminated from stormwater runoff from above. And then you've got catch basins along the way, which helps settle all the turbidity of the water. So in essence, the way the whole system is designed is that, yes, the dirty or polluted stormwater that runs into the bioswale gets filtered down. Yes, there is a lifespan and a maintenance, but for this, it is years, decades. Does that answer your question? Okay. Jackson Park. So this one is a 2-year project. It is a very much an urban development. Takes place in Lake City, and this is 6-floor apartment building. It's a 6/2, and then there's 14 different 3 and 4 bedroom townhomes, as well as a central courtyard and amenity spaces. It's currently in design. It's set to start in December, but I am not part of the team, but I know that they're working through the design currently, and then hopefully, like Anna mentioned previously, there's items to include in the courtyard spaces or where there's flat work to mitigate stormwater pollution from water runoff in the form of rain gardens or Braddock boxes, as you guys will see in one of our other projects. But a big goal with this job, I know there's challenges to publicly funded jobs, right? Obviously cost being one of them. So how do we lower the cost? How do we minimize risk? And how do we keep things productive? And risk can be risk to the client, risk to the environment and the community. And then how do we maximize productivity? And that essentially means how do we be more efficient on site, spend less time on site, and reduce our overall impact. Okay, how do we do that? So I apologize for the graphics. We're still in design, but this is our BIM model, which shows our proposed plan, which there's currently a creek, an underground creek in a culvert that goes through the site under several building footprints. So our plan is to divert the creek around the site, not under the building footprints. So that is going to be a careful bit of planning up front so we can do all of that work prior to any of the heavy excavation, so we can complete that cleanly and not affect the downstream wetlands. Other examples of how we can make this a successful project are, right, our BMPs, making sure that everything is in place prior to we stick a shovel in the dirt, successfully completing that creek bypass, and making sure that anything we do above ground doesn't get into that waterway. And then how do we phase the foundation and the earthwork around that site? There's going to be various locations of cut and fill. So can we sequence that in such a way that while we were working on a large cut section of the site, say in the main building, can we sequence other work just after it so that most of that material doesn't have to leave site? If it's suitable structural fill, can we do that at a time to where we don't have to bring a ton of trucks to the site? We can reuse that in different locations, so as to reduce our overall footprint or impact. And then another one, big one, is dewatering, right? How do we sequence the work to make sure that we're starting at a good time and we're performing most of our earthwork when the water table is lower, and condensing that work so we can reduce time dewatering, because one, it's expensive to the client, and two, there's potential risk to the environment there. To summarize everything, right? I think the biggest benefits of Salmon-Safe from a construction perspective: water quality protection, stormwater runoff during the construction process, and then after the construction process, right? What can we do during construction to mitigate any risk and prevent runoff? And then what we build and how we build affects the long-term use of the facility and the neighborhoods and the communities around that. Promoting the use of healthier building materials, like I mentioned, the cork infill, the bioswale, the biomedia, the filter media. Can we help as a contractor through the design process to encourage the use of those materials, just despite some of them maybe being cost prohibitive? Reducing risk, right? Reducing risk to the environment, the community, and to the client. And then hopefully overall what we do, and the more projects we complete, it's helping us and our subcontractors and our fellow tradesmen in the industry to just increase the overall standards and make this the new norm, which I think helps everyone in the long term.
Thank you, Nate. I appreciate your time and sharing your experience. I just want to mention to folks too that I know when you're working with really difficult budgets and you're already trying to meet the evergreen standard, oftentimes with state funding, that you may not be able to choose Salmon-Safe certification for your sites, but you can choose Salmon-Safe contractors. The Salmon-Safe contractors pay all of the accreditation fees themselves. And so, for instance, in a recent example with the city of Tukwila, they didn't have the funding to certify a project, but they did add a point system in their bid process to encourage a Salmon-Safe contractor to win that project. So they knew that in building out that site, there would be fewer environmental impacts when you're using a highly accredited contractor that has spent a great deal of time learning about water quality projects. And not every project is going to require certain compliances around stormwater. But if you're working with a Salmon-Safe contractor, they have already made that commitment that at every site they work at, they will be achieving zero sediment runoff at that site and making decisions around water quality and a healthy Puget Sound. So just keeping that in mind, that is one pathway for you to, at least during the construction period, have a Salmon-Safe certified contractor on site and to be making a difference during one of the most highly impactful periods of a project's history, and that is during excavation and during the construction process where there's concerns for runoff. So just a thought to plant that that's a possibility for your projects. And then we're going to move into the case study of the Southard. This
Ellen?
project was, yes?
I just wanted to say I just put the link for the Salmon-Safe contractor accreditation standards into the chat. So
Oh, great.
everyone can grab that. If they want to take note.
Thanks, Lauren. And yes, and Lauren's been popping links to resources in the chat. So you may check that out. And we can also forward on those links when HDC forwards on this recording. So we're happy to share those again. The Southard was one of the projects featured at the HDC Summer Social. And I'm going to let Anna introduce how we achieved Salmon-Safe certification at the Southard in Tukwila. This is the site built out by Homestead Community Land Trust adjacent to the Riverton Church. Anna?
Thank you, Ellen. And you all are lucky because we saved one of the best case studies here for last. This, which is the Southard, which attained Salmon-Safe certification last summer. For those who aren't familiar, it's 18 homes arranged around a central community green space. And it also includes a children's play area, a shared pea patch with raised planter beds for gardening. In terms of the Salmon-Safe side of things and what the project did to achieve certification, there's a base requirement to ensure compliance with existing environmental regulations. That was a precondition for the project. And then we worked with them a lot, as I alluded earlier, to stormwater management is quite important in our urban projects. And so they were already treating stormwater from all pollution generating impervious surfaces like parking areas and drives, those vehicular use areas, to a non-infiltrating bioretention cell. And that was sized such that it would remove 91% of the runoff from these impervious areas for water quality treatment. However, Salmon-Safe was engaged a little bit later in the process. It was already early in construction when Salmon-Safe was brought together with the team. And so we found that stormwater from rooftops went to gutters and downspouts and was going to be kind of more conventionally drained. And so together with Site Story and other partners on the design team, we made it a condition of the project to provide treatment, sort of retrofitted treatment for those rooftop surfaces, which Salmon-Safe, although it's not by code designated as pollution generating surface, Salmon-Safe use it that way. So had the team install Gradix boxes or something similar. In this case, it was Gradix boxes, which are essentially pod rain gardens in a sort of tote with a specific media mix that provides really robust water quality treatment. Then in terms of long-term operations and maintenance of the development, the landscaping palette was already biased towards native and drought-tolerant plants that conserved water for irrigation and had a high efficiency irrigation system, but it was a condition for the project to develop a water conservation plan so that over time, as plants are established, that irrigation may be scaled back, or there's other maintenance practices like over mulching that can help to retain moisture in the soil. Those sorts of things are embedded into that water conservation plan to ensure efficient use of water over time. Together with that water maintenance side of things, and going slightly out of order here, just in terms of talking about the project as it relates to these conditions. But number two, the project also needed to develop an integrated pest management plan, which guides the landscape maintenance for vegetation, and particularly any pesticides that are used in the landscaping. So again, we're being both sensitive of humans that are using the space as well as impacts downstream and on pollinators and other species that are active on the site itself. Residents are invited to install their own landscaping at the back of each building. And so as another condition of Salmon-Safe certification, it was to make educational materials related to gardening and the landscaping practices consistent with Salmon-Safe standards available to the homeowners. And I think Ellen had a really lovely photo earlier of some of those or maybe it's coming, sorry, of those materials. So together, the sort of whole site management can be in harmony with the individual house landscape management in terms of being protective of the watershed. And then there were a number of recommendations that we see as related to environmental performance, but going beyond the base requirements of Salmon-Safe. So we suggested adding inserts to catch basins located within impervious surfaces around the adjacent Riverton Park United Methodist Church. You can't quite see it in the renderings, but it is immediately adjacent, and these are kind of an easy way to provide some water quality treatment in existing drainage infrastructure. And then we also proposed, as you saw earlier in that hierarchy of stormwater management, rainwater harvesting is valued quite highly in our hierarchy. So we suggested, although it didn't require, that rain barrels be installed at the rear of houses, and homeowners can use those for irrigation or other uses. I find at my home, where we have a rain barrel, sometimes that gets repurposed for water play with my kids too. And then there's a legacy dogwood tree on the site, and we suggested that an arborist be consulted with to ensure the health and longevity of that tree, to have it be preserved.
Thanks, Anna. And I see that we're starting to run out of time, and we want to make sure we have a conversation with all of you. So we're just going to do a rapid fire on these final slides in order to get to that conversation and Q&A. But one of the things we did at the site was provide some interpretive signage so that the residents and visitors understood how the Southard achieved Salmon-Safe, but also the net zero certification. There's multiple interpretive signs on site. Nate's team came out and saved us. And this is not an unusual story, but from the time we wrote our grant until the time the cash started flowing, our budget increased substantially, and we were out of money before we even started. And so if it weren't for venture construction, we would not have been able to complete this project and would have probably waited another year and waited for more grant funding. But they were incredibly generous, helping us get the stormwater features built, as well as installing the footings for interpretive signage, a pollinator bench. So they were just incredible partners to us in making this happen. And this is Nate's team on site, basically, we had to dig up the existing landscape that was completed in March in order to install this. Every bit of that soil was used next door at the Riverton church for their community gardens. And then the plants that we dug up became a plant bank for the new residents to use in their backyards. So it was a win-win. We reused the materials and we reused the plants. So nothing was wasted. There's a very happy teammate getting to the bottom of a very deep hole that he had to dig for some heavy footings. Nate, feel free to weigh in here if you have other things to share.
No, I mean, thank you for that. It was more of a fun project for us. So we were incredibly happy to help. It did not take more effort than you would expect. It was pretty cool for a lot of us to see, because a lot of these projects don't require, or a lot of projects don't require these that aren't Salmon-Safe. So being able to see that as a company, every person that helped, even all of the office folk, to see the gradic boxes and the things that we can do to help reduce stormwater runoff. I think it was more beneficial to us in our learning and education and continuing the goal in the company. So it was really great to be a part of.
Thanks, Nate. And I will say, as you know, we got to work side by side with venture construction, as did some of the residents who were earning some of their hours contributions to building out the site as was required of them by Homestead. So it was a really amazing exchange, and really a labor of love.
I
So I'm
wanted
gonna
to
let
say one more thing about the soil.
Yeah, go ahead, Maren.
The utter joy of actually having completed that that foundational pit there was that the soil was really quite hard. So having the right equipment, having, the right tools was instrumental. But that is why we had to take a different approach to the stormwater um, catchment. And that's why we did an above ground Gradix box and oyster barrels. So anyway, it just all kind of comes full circle there.
It does. And this is Maren working with the residents.
Yeah, so at this point, we actually have everything installed and we're just at the point of getting the plants in. So we had set everything up and we were just beginning to get kind of have stations. Everybody had a different station that they were working on. So how many people did we have that day, Ellen? Was it about 12?
Yeah, I think we had
14?
about 12 residents, some with children, so the kids were able to help as well. So probably with the kids, we had about 15. And then I think Nate's team sent around 20 people out. So yeah, like I said, a labor of love, a lot of good energy went into this and physical labor. This is what this looked like last year.
Yeah, I
Right
was
after
going to
the
say
installation.
they turned out great. So well done.
Yeah, they turned out beautiful. They're a really nice landscape feature. This is last year as the plants were getting established. They're looking even better this year. One of the other things that was important to us was locating these close to the sidewalk. So these are ADA accessible for anyone who, may have impairments and are operating from wheelchairs. They can roll right up and work their garden. Maren, did you want to share anything about this diagram?
Sure. This diagram really helps kind of illustrate what's happening. The water does come down off the roof through the downspouts. There's a splash guard to help disperse the intensity of the water as it meets the garden bed. And then you'll see that there's a pipe at the bottom and a pipe that kind of comes up because we also had to plan for the reality of getting a larger storm event. And so ideally, in most situations, the water is allowed to percolate down and through the plants and the soils and the gravel. And during that process, the water quality is improved by removing particulates and other contaminants that come in off of that roof runoff. And the site was relatively close to freeways and air pathways. So there definitely is some particulate and definitely leaf litter and things like that that come down and through. So they'll need to be managed over time. But in general, Gradix boxes have been found to be quite resilient. They'll need to add more mulch back in. At some point, we've advised them to test the soil to see if it's gotten to a beyond contaminated level, and then they would need to basically just rebuild these layers back in. They can pull the plants out to the side, save them, extract the layers to dispose of, and then rebuild back in. But overall, this is a fairly simple intervention to take the water that's coming off the roof, give it a moment to have its water quality improved and before it goes off to the storm drain.
Thanks, Maren. I do want to mention in the case of Salmon-Safe and in the case of the maintenance of these stormwater strategies, we did write information for the HOA handbooks. So all of the maintenance instructions have been provided to the owners, and we're on call to the community members over the next 5 years. And then just in tighter spaces where we did not have room for a Gradix box, we did oyster barrels. And oyster barrels are another solution that have been tested at industrial sites, just like the Gradix boxes, often larger at scale. So these were all residential scale. And to our knowledge, the first residential scale Gradix boxes and oyster barrels, at least in our region, if not in the country. And then there's the diagram of how the oyster barrels work. Oysters actually give off a lot of powder that becomes cementous, but when it's mixed in the soils, it becomes a great additive for microorganisms and things like that. And so we actually reused all of the oyster powder at the gardens next door as well at Riverton Church. And then again, Marin created some great instructions for the HOA, so folks understand what plants they have, what they should look like, and how to maintain them. And then Salmon-Safe and Site Story often partner with other groups that help bring information. And some of you, or many of you, as you know, the Seattle Tilth and Garden Hotline are on call and do a lot of work with affordable housing providers. And they worked with us here with a focus not just on teaching the residents how to maintain the Gradix boxes, but also how to maintain their food garden. And they helped us with culturally relevant plant starts. A large number of the residents at the Southard are immigrants and refugees, had never had their own homes, had never had their own gardens, and coming from other places, of course, desire culturally relevant foods. And so we helped create a new partnership between the residents and Seattle Tilth for the long-term maintenance of the site and their community garden.
Ellen, I think it's
And
important to just distinguish that we actually there was a garden bed area for the edible foods. We were not encouraging residents to grow food in the Gradix boxes next to their homes.
correct. Right. Thanks, Maureen. Yes. You're not supposed to grow food with stormwater runoff before it's treated. So therefore they can't use it in the Gradix boxes, but there were community gardens built. These are the residents that joined us on Gradix Box Day. And with that, again, we want to thank King County Waterworks. And thank you for joining us today. And we've got a few minutes left for a conversation.
So the last, I'm sorry, there was one
Yeah.
last, it looks like Matthew, you actually installed some Gradix boxes down in Tacoma?
Yeah, we finished the affordable housing project for the Shiloh Baptist Church, and late in the project, HUD spoke up about some NEPA requirements. So that was the negotiated terms of endearment. So we built them. We used the Port of Vancouver's specs on them,
Mhm.
which reuses those big wine. They're like a crate with plastic liner, not of a scale that you could actually walk up and look into them. But they work well. Listening to your presentation, I was confused for a moment until you clarified that these are things that just operate on their own and aren't interactive with residents, other than you can see some plants sticking out the top.
Well, in this case, the residents will be maintaining them, and that's why we provided that information in the HOA handbook. And on other affordable housing projects too, Anna has been involved with legal language for CC&Rs. So, beyond the certification, we're on board to support the longer term operations and maintenance of projects through the 5-year life cycle of the certification. Most of our clients do renew their certifications. So we're grateful that we have these long-term relationships. And just curious if anyone has any retrofit projects coming up or are looking at some of the challenges with the new stormwater codes and thinking about how to get their projects to code. So just want to welcome any comments or questions, thoughts from folks that are here.
So my question is, we're typically just responding to the requirements of the authorities having jurisdiction or funders. This Salmon-Safe seems to be voluntary. And are there incentives above helping water quality to this program?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in Redmond, you can get extra floor area ratio out of a project if you do Salmon-Safe. Um, there are in Shoreline, there's substantial incentives for reduced permitting fees. So it
Cool.
really comes down to each city's individual goals for incentives and goals for stormwater. But Matthew, you just led me to my final comments is that we hope as things play out with HDC, that HDC will work with us. We really want to encourage more policy around these incentives to make Salmon-Safe achievable for affordable housing providers. You know, people care about the environment, and low wealth families want to be part of the solution as much as any family wants to be part of the solution in terms of protecting the planet and having a healthy place to live. And so we feel these partnerships and incentives are really, really important to get us there. And again, just really respectful of the fact that we know that affordable housing providers and that are designers and their contractors are very, very challenged by the constraints of budgets right now, gross lack of funding with gigantic demand. And so we're really in our affordable housing initiative trying to find ways to partner and relieve that burden. I think great example with the Spirit Journey Village that you saw earlier is because they committed to Salmon-Safe, and because they were willing to go beyond code. King County has offered them a substantial funding support for their infrastructure. So King County just happened to be looking for a pilot project to support in Skyway. And so the timing was perfect. The location was right. And we had been working with them closely to achieve that. King County does have incentives for Salmon-Safe. If there's King County funding involved, we're part of their priority certifications. They have a number of certifications that they prioritize, and we are one of them. So as we move forward, we really want to create a pathway for affordable housing providers to be more engaged in Puget Sound recovery. And again, this sense of pride and commitment for the residents that live there. Right now, I think a great entree into working with us is also thinking about retrofit projects. Projects that you're going to be required to meet new stormwater standards, but maybe don't have the budget to meet them. And working with us, we can help do that planning. You get a pretty rigorous report from Salmon-Safe at the end of the project, and a number of the mission-driven organizations that we've worked with have then taken that report and used that report as a mechanism for some of the grant writing that they've done to achieve more support from funders for green stormwater infrastructure, for habitat, and just going beyond code from a water quality standpoint. So I want to be cognizant of time. We're at 1:03. Are there other questions or comments that folks would like to share? Okay, well, thanks for joining us today. And I know want to again thank HDC for their partnership and for welcoming us. And we will be sharing out the link to this presentation in the next coming days.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone.
Really appreciate it, and I'll gather some of the resources that were discussed about the incentives as well, and include that when we share the recording to the registrants. So thank you all so much for your time today. Really great session. Appreciate you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Laura.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
And Laura, you're saving this to the cloud?
Yes,
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Laura.
Thank
We'll
you,
circle
Laura.
back and debrief and talk about where we go next.
sounds good. Thanks.
All
Bye.
right, take care. Bye.